Call the meeting to order. We'll come back into executive session. We were just in a an open session. We're just in a half-hour executive session to discuss contractual matters. And at this time, we will open the meeting and ask for public input. Anybody wish to be heard? Seeing no one, we'll move to our student report. Tonight we have Matt Layton. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Last Wednesday, March 5th through Friday, March 7th, 16 student council members attended the Massachusetts Association of Student Council State Spring Conference down in Hyannis. This year, there were many awards given out to council members. First off, Danielle Gillis, a junior, won the James Rokas Award, which gives her a full scholarship to the Massachusetts Association of Student Councils camp. She had to write a 250-page essay on accomplishments through her work with student council. There are only 4 awards given out, one from each region. Ours happens to be the Northeast region, so 3 other students were chosen as well. Last year, student Jackie Lanzaro won, so the tradition continues with our students winning. So congrats to Danielle. Next up, Christina Fusco was nominated for the Unsung Hero Award for the Northeast region as well, The council as a whole won the award for the Silver Council of Excellence. This award is based upon the Book of Excellence that the council has to prepare. It's basically a self-study of the council, highlighting their successes and their missions of the council. Last year they won the bronze, so let's hope next year they win the gold. The council this year also performed a lip sync called The Evolution of Miley, which was a mix of all Miley Cyrus's hits from over the years. They came in 3rd this year, and they were very, very excited that they were chosen.
I watched it today, the superintendent for it.
Oh, you did?
It was quite entertaining.
Yeah, it was.
They got good response from the crowd.
They did.
Cyrus's hits, what was it, like 30 seconds long? Or?
No, she actually has a lot.
All right.
She goes way back, Jerry.
It was a good 3 minutes. It was
I'm
really
glad you know who she is, though.
And lastly, council members Jackie Lanzaro and Alex McGeehee ran a workshop called Yeah, I'm Different, and that got a lot of great feedback, so congrats to those 2. Yesterday, some exciting news. The cheering team competed in the state competition and came in 4th. Today, it was announced that they will be attending New England's.
That's great.
So congrats to the cheering team. News from the co-op wrestling team. Linfield wrestler Eric Kirk qualified for the Nationals this weekend. So I do not know what that is, but I believe he'll be attending. So congratulations, Eric. This week, Dollars for Scholars will be holding its annual phone-a-thon. Began last night and will run until Friday. Last Thursday, the annual Junior Parent College Night was held in the high school auditorium. This is put on by the Guidance Office and provides juniors and their parents very helpful information with regards to the college process. Tonight, the girls' basketball team and boys' co-op wrestling team are holding their banquets. Tomorrow night, Winter Sports Awards will be held in the gymnasium beginning at 6:30. On Wednesday, Student Council is holding their annual administration lunch appreciation. For sports, the boys hockey team had a tough season-ending loss against Marblehead February 28th at Stoneham. They lost 4-1, but managed to finish the season as Cal champs. So congrats to the team on a very successful season. The girls' basketball team had their first round of states on Wednesday, February 26th, defeating Boston Latin. They moved to the second round, facing Winthrop, but came out with a loss. They had a great season overall, so congrats to them as well. The boys' basketball team qualified for states and faced Stoneham in their first round on the 27th, but lost. It was a very successful season, so congrats to the team. Next week, the high school Life Smarts team will be heading to the Federal Reserve Bank in Boston to compete in the Massachusetts competition. The winner from Massachusetts will travel down to Disney World for the finals, and it has happened before from North Reading, so we are hoping for a win. To finish on a happy note, spring sports begin next week. So we're looking forward to that. For my student work tonight, I just thought I'd talk about last week's NEASC accreditation visit. I was heavily involved in it, and it was an honor to be part of it through the whole process, beginning back with our self-study in September of 2011. I was a student rep to the assessment team. Stayed after school on the Thursday half days, worked with the teachers to formulate our self-study with regards to assessment, which was very interesting to see a perspective from our teachers compared to students with regards to the assessment process of how it's given. Then over February break, I found out that I was a critical part of the visit. On the Sunday, during the panel presentation, I gave my view as a student from a senior, what my experience has been like. I found that very emotional to get through, how I'll be missing the school when I leave come June. And then on Monday morning, we gave a building tour to the visiting team, and they were amazed of how we work so well together in a building that is so out of date, to the small classrooms, to just nothing that functions, basically, from the science labs to the technology crashing. They were pretty amazed that this building is kept so clean despite its age. So we were very happy to hear about that. The students that were shadowed were very happy. They got asked questions, what they were like, and just hearing back from a few of the visiting team members, they were very happy overall, and it was great to have them. So I think overall the visit went well, and the students found it very exciting as well to see and highlight the accomplishments of the high school.
Questions or comments?
Matt, I had a chance to hear you speak at the panel presentation. You did an excellent job.
Thank
You
you.
were emotional, and I hope all of your classmates feel the same way about North Reading High School that you do.
Honestly, they do.
You did a great job.
Just talking with them, I mean, I think everyone feels the same way I do. And
Yeah.
Did you say somebody wrote a 250-page essay?
yes.
250 pages.
Oh, page. I'm sorry.
He did
No.
say page.
Page. Did I say
I was gonna
page?
say, that's longer than any book I've ever
Oh,
read.
no.
I mean,
I'm
no,
sorry.
it's unbelievable.
Read, any book you've ever
Any
read,
book
yeah.
I've ever read.
Yeah.
Word. I think that was the word floating around today at the our little meeting. No, it was word essay. Word
Okay.
essay, not page.
The students were impressive. That NEASC process is quite intense.
Very.
And
Yeah.
it was a great thing to go through because the visiting team, they had a lot of enthusiasm too about being part of the process. And I think they walked away with a really positive feeling about North Reading High School.
Yeah,
If there's any
I think
question
we had
about
high
that.
grades until they met with the school committee.
Right,
and
well, that
dropped us a
was,
few points, but
Jerry and I were talking a little smack talk, because the principal of Rockport High School was the head of the NEASC committee, and we started talking sports, of course, and he said, I don't want to talk sports with you guys, we hardly ever beat you in anything, so that probably wasn't a good thing to bring up, but I think other than that, it went well.
I agree.
Great job, Matt.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. No. Next, let's move to the update on the school project. Kathy?
Thank you. The last secondary school building committee was held on February 25th, beginning at 5:30 PM. In terms of the construction update, so much is happening so quickly that what I'm going to report to you tonight is outdated, but at the last meeting, we were informed that the installation of light fixtures in classrooms has begun. Installation of ceiling tiles is to follow. The wastewater treatment plant clean water testing is on target. Kitchen freezers have been delivered. Above ceiling inspections in building B and C are underway. Auditorium ceiling and trusses are getting painted black, and the sound structures are installed. The gymnasium drywall is finishing, followed by the painting of the ceiling and equipment installation. Locker rooms are taking shape with tile and other finishes starting. Floor tile will begin in the next 4 weeks, with the casework beginning in mid-April. The auditorium, gymnasium, and kitchen work are on schedule and will be turned over at the same time in early September. As far as construction update, I'm not sure if Mr. Venezia, Mr. Bowers, or Mrs. Imbriano would like to add anything.
I'll say that for the first time in months, there was no work going on Saturday, which is when I take my usual walkthrough, so it was locked up very tight. I'm going to defer to Cliff and Janine, because I think they went through on Thursday.
The auditorium's coming along wonderfully. We walked along the catwalk
Yeah,
and went
all
up
the way
there,
up, yeah.
which we'd never done before, so that's pretty amazing.
And that's with the staging's still there.
Yeah,
Imagine what
that's-
it's like when it comes out of there, because
It's way down.
you're 50
Way
feet above
Yeah,
the
it's a
floor.
long, long way. It does, auditorium is painted black. A lot of the ceiling tiles are being put in now, even the normal ones, not the ones that are cut and stuff. Light fixtures are in. Trying to remember what else was there that was.
The refrigerator and
Oh,
freezer
that's
are
right,
no longer
the
just on site, they're installed.
They're installed. That's so cool.
The hoods for the kitchen are on site, and all of the Durock has been put up in the kitchen area, ready for Let's see what what else is cooking there? Most all of the intumescent paint is on the members overhead that need to receive that. That's a paint that expands and provides fireproofing, and it doesn't look like fireproofing, it looks like paint. What else? I guess that's about all that.
We're officially into finish work. I mean, it's finished work
really
at this
into
point in
finished
time.
work. And they're talking about the floor tiles in the classrooms at this point. Really moving ahead rapidly.
So exciting. I did attend the tour for the NEASC site visit team, and I can tell you that they were absolutely amazed. And they kept walking around, and at one point, one of them asked me if I was hiring. Just based on what they saw and what was going to be available to the students when it's fully operational. And they were just in awe, I can tell you. And in terms of design update, it's exactly what was just said. Finishes are being applied along Main Street, and the designer is monitoring progress and answering questions. And in terms of our public relations, Jeff Simons is in the audience today, and I'd just like to say that the documentation of the project through his pictures is remarkable. So thank you, because it gives us an opportunity to take a look at that in the course of a busy day and just reflect on why we do what we do and keeping the end in mind. So we appreciate
Well,
that.
Picture's worth 1,000 words. I just made that up.
Or pages. Pages are worth, no.
Whatever it is.
And just to add to that, I know that no one likes to read real books anymore, but man, we got a coffee table book in that one, Jeff. I mean, there
I
are
know.
so many great pictures from the beginning to the end. Well, not the end yet, but from the beginning when there was nothing there. So I too appreciate everything you've done. It's been awesome.
It's amazing. Thank you.
About a year this week,
Yep,
when the steel started to arrive.
That's right.
Go up.
The first beam of steel went up on the night of town meeting in March when we went for the
Oh.
override.
Yep.
Mhm.
That was the first beam went up there.
22nd, so.
When they start, Jeff, with the foundation though? When they started that in November or December?
it's right. We had the groundbreaking in November. So.
Yeah, but they hadn't,
December's, yeah.
yeah. So it's a lot of,
Very exciting. So again, at the last meeting, change order 13 was approved, and the OPM described the process to be followed to determine the order of magnitude when a request to change the design of the project is made. A report on expenditures to date, as well as the reimbursement from MSBA through December 2013, was made by Mr. Phil Dardino. And the Secondary School Building Committee discussed the CPC requirement for an ornamental traffic light fixture that includes an expenditure of an additional $30,000. That CPC meeting was held, and that ornamental light will be installed.
I think that's a $37,000.
What did I say?
30,000.
Oh, 37,
We don't
I'm
want
sorry.
to underestimate
I have
the
37
value.
here.
Right, of that ornament. We don't
37. So that is taking place. And the next regular meeting of the Secondary School Building Committee is scheduled for tomorrow evening, Tuesday, March 11th, beginning at 5:30 PM.
Okay. Any other questions on the building? All right, next we have a policy manual review, revision, the first reading of a new policy on pregnant students. I don't believe we had,
Suburban Coalition.
oh, okay. Cliff, you want to give us a Run Coalition update first? I think you attended. Right, yeah.
Suburban Coalition?
Yeah.
The meeting was held on February 26th. The Suburban Coalition is a group that looks to try to coordinate between various bodies, both school committees and selectmen. And this particular meeting was oriented toward state and local taxes and the difficulty of providing local services. And as everybody knows, the governor's fiscal 15 budget has all of the local officials disappointed. And both unrestricted local aid is level funded, and Chapter 70 is only increasing by about 2.5%, 2.3%. And that's putting them well behind where they were pre-recession. So the panel that was put together included Noah Berger, who's president of Mass Budget and Policy Center, and Representative Jay Kaufman, chair of the Joint Committee on Revenue, and Senator Mike Barrett, who is a member of the Joint Committee on Public Service. And Noah started off by giving an analysis of the revenue, and he blamed current shortfalls principally on the return to the 5.3% income tax rate and other tax cuts that have amounted to about a $3 billion loss in state revenue, and that's what really comes down on us. And then he went through a little analysis of the nickname that we picked up in the 70s of Taxachusetts, and that no longer is applicable. We were at about 13.8% of personal income as local and state revenues at that time. And that's dropped down to about 10.4%, which puts us somewhere in a little below the midpoint of all of the states as far as that kind of revenue. And he also threw out a couple of other little factoids that 1 in 3 kids in the state depend on public health. And at the same time, we have the highest percentage of bachelor's degrees of any state in the country. So it's kind of an interesting where we have a lot of dependency and a lot of high-powered people. And he says that local aid has declined by about 46% since 2001, and Chapter 78 has declined by about 5%. Another early education and care and higher education, public health have declined in double-digit percentages at the same time. And then Jay Kaufman had a chance to talk, and he says that there's a serious complication in addressing the revenue shortfall because of the fact that Massachusetts has a regressive tax system. And the recent legislation formed a 15-member bipartisan commission on tax fairness, and they had actually completed their work the night before, and so he had information which was kind of embargoed at this session. The findings aren't public, and the meetings but the meeting attendees did get a preview. In summary, they're looking to try to spread the wealth. They voted 9-4 to amend the Constitution to allow a graduated income tax, and they're trying to put pieces together in order to have that happen. There are a number of other ideas, including increasing the earned income tax. Their goal is to tax the upper 20% of earners, those that are basically from about $114,000 a year and up, and lower the others. The 80% would get lower taxes or actually credit. That has a way to go yet. Doing a constitutional amendment is going to take a while, several years anyway. And Senator Barrett rounded out the panel. He is very heavy into climate change and a very strong advocate of carbon tax as a way of providing incentives to reduce reliance on energy sources that cause global warming. And it was very difficult for me to sit still and be polite during that session because of the fact that this anthropogenic climate change is not a reality. It's bogus. And I put enough effort into it to believe that wholeheartedly. So I sat there and was polite.
First, I want to say that's not a committee opinion. That's
No.
that's Mr. Bauer's opinion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you know,
It's not Al Gore's opinion either.
Right.
The one thing that you can explain to me later then is why is Greenland called Greenland? because once it was green.
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's actually a killer argument, but anyway, he went through how a carbon tax could address the revenue issues, which is kind of interesting because I thought he was talking about trying to reduce carbon emissions, and really what he's looking for is
Raise
revenue
money.
to solve the other issues.
Right.
What he left out, of course, was the subsidies that are needed to support alternative energy sources, which is going to eat up all of his
Carbon tax.
finances. Anyway, I thought of his arguments being both bizarre and dangerous, but that again is a personal opinion. And I did stay quiet, not embarrass us all.
I see they didn't let, I guess there were no Republicans invited or conservatives invited to be on that panel.
No, they never have any conservatives on the panel.
Okay.
There aren't many of those, there's about 5 in the whole state.
I'm falling more that way every day, so I'm leaving Jerry's side. Any questions for Cliff on the Suburban Coalition? And it's a good group. It's good for us to be part of it. They do a lot of work to try to increase the state support, federal support for.
And we wouldn't know
Schools.
what was coming
Right.
from these two people who have some power. So, good to know.
Okay. Now let's get to that new policy, policy JQE. And Kathy, I understand this is a requirement. We're required to have this policy, and we haven't had one. Is that the?
Yes, that's correct. As we go through the process of preparing documents for the coordinated program review, that will take place next year, but we submit the documents this May, it became apparent to us that a policy that we need to have in the policy manual was missing.
Okay.
And that is why this is in front of you this evening. And the policy subcommittee met. I'm not sure if they would like to address this. But the policy subcommittee is presenting this new policy regarding pregnant students to you for a first reading. And the subcommittee reviewed the MASC policy as well as an existing policy from a neighboring district. So the copy of the draft policy in your packet is what they are proposing to you this evening.
Since it's a new policy, should we
This
have
is a
it?
brand-new
We
policy.
should probably read it then.
Yes,
should read it.
I
Okay.
think so.
Okay, it's policy JQE, pregnant students. The North Reading School District wishes to preserve educational opportunities for those students who may become pregnant and/or take on parenting responsibilities. School-age mothers, unless they receive adequate assistance, might drop out of school without acquiring the necessary education or without marketable skills. Pregnant students will be permitted to continue in school in all instances when continued attendance has the sanction of the expectant mother's physician. The physician's approval of this continued attendance must be on file at the school. The student and her physician, in cooperation with the school staff, will develop an appropriate educational plan if it is agreed she should no longer attend school regularly. After giving birth, the student will be permitted to return to the same academic and extracurricular program as before the leave of absence. Every effort will be made to see that the educational program of the student is disrupted as little as possible, that health counseling services as well as instruction are offered, that return to school after delivery is encouraged, and that every opportunity to complete high school is provided. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve first reading of policy JQE.
Move to approve first reading of new policy JQE, pregnant students.
Motion by Cliff, second by Janine. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0. Thank you. Policy Subcommittee. Okay. Next, we're going to move to the budget presentation for our preliminary budget for fiscal 2015.
Yes, thank you. Prior to Michael taking over the rest of the presentation, I'd just like to indicate to you that a copy of the modified level services budget was included in your packet. And I inserted, as I do every year, a letter to the school committee. I would just like to note that you had requested that we prepare a modified level services budget, and a level services budget that provides the same services from one year to the next as well. And so a level services budget that also includes a part of year 3 of NRPS 2016 would require a 6.5% increase. That is not the budget that is being presented to you this evening. So what we have already done as an administrative council is to spend time taking a look at what we currently have in place, make adjustments to the budget, and then propose to you this evening an FY15 budget, and Michael will move forward through this, but it includes a 4.9% increase rather than a 6.5%. What you'll see in your packet as well is the budget timeline that we are continuing to follow. And in addition, the Director of Finance and Operations prepared a report for you on the impact of unfunded mandates that was included in your packet, and he will reference that at the end of the budget presentation. That was another project that the committee had asked Michael to take on this year, and I think he's done so admirably. It's just an incredible amount of information that's included in your packet.
Right.
He must be working like
I was going to say.
26 hours a day.
Well, remember, he gets in at like 5 in the morning.
So I'd like to now turn this over
Great, thank you.
to
Thank you,
Michael.
Superintendent Willis. So, in front of you this evening is a copy of the PowerPoint that I'm going to go through, just went around, and as Willis just mentioned, the detailed budget book as well. So I'm going to start by talking about the budget challenges. And, we're certainly facing a series of challenges this year that have certainly made the FY15 budget process, very challenging, as we've certainly deliberated as an administrative team over the last several weeks. One of which is a declining federal grant revenue. So you may recall about last year hearing the term sequestration being discussed about a year ago, and the potential impact of that could potentially mean a 5 to 6% reduction on our federal grants, on our major federal grants. Well, certainly North Reading experienced that decline in this current fiscal year 14, as our IDA grant, which is our major grant that offsets our special education services, declined by about $25,000. So that was, this funding level that we have in FY14, with that decline is anticipated to continue next fiscal year. So that certainly resulted in the need to certainly shift some costs back to our general fund appropriation. So we have federal grant funds that are declining. The governor's proposal in terms of flat state aid was presented at the end of January. It's now moving through the House and so forth. But he had proposed level funding local aid, and North Reading currently is only due to receive the minimum $25 per pupil increase in Chapter 70 that all districts are receiving. So that accounts for only $114,000 increase. So it's certainly, state aid is not continuing to increase the level of inflation as well as the level of our fixed costs in fiscal year 15. Local property, certainly constrained local revenue is another challenge. Local property taxes, as you know, with Proposition 2.5, it's capped at 2.5%. Other local seats remain relatively flat, so they're certainly not keeping up with fixed cost increases. Fixed cost, that is certainly a challenge, as that's the cost of benefits, health insurance, general liability insurance, retirement costs. All those costs have steadily been on the rise and are taking up a greater share of the town's total revenue each year. For example, in FY12, the total fixed costs represented about 27 to 28% of total revenue, and more recently in FY14, FY15, that total fixed cost is taking up about 32%. So fixed costs are certainly on the rise each fiscal year, and that is a common trend statewide. Certainly health insurance cost is a big portion of that. We certainly are dealing with an increase in unfunded mandates, as Superintendent Willis just referenced. Certainly a project that myself and the central team worked on over the past several weeks was a compiled list of state mandates. So that is a detailed list of those is referenced in your packet, as you can see. So as you can see, it's certainly significant. They are increasing each year with the educator evaluation system, certainly PARC, bullying prevention, concussion policies, fingerprinting, retail. The list of state mandates can go on. And certainly the special education unfunded mandate costs are increasingly rising each fiscal year. So those are just a snapshot of our budget challenges. This is a quick little pie chart that we've presented in the past. And I will say, just what I just talked about, certainly, this is the total revenue picture that makes up not only the school budget, but as well as the town budget for North Reading. Local taxes are the largest percent at 70.2%. Certainly state aid right behind that, or at 14.1%. So again, we're heavily relying on our local property taxes. Local receipts is about 9.8%, and then our other budget subsidies, which we'll get into a little bit more detail later on in the presentation. That those are the fees and the grants are right here. That is at 5.9%. So this breakdown, this pie chart, these percentages have remained pretty consistent over the last several fiscal years. Just want to touch a little bit on our budget priorities. We voted our goals in October, so I think this is a highlight of kind of the six major priorities and goals. Certainly maintaining low class size is always a priority of the district during budget season, so that was a focus as we prepared the FY15 budget. Opening the new high school building, we definitely want to successfully open that new building, and you certainly heard a presentation back in December of what that's going to entail. That's certainly a budget driver as well, which I'll get to in a moment. Implementing year 3 of NRPS 2016, the plan for continuous education improvement. That is always certainly a major driver that guides our budgetary decisions. So we would be in year 3 in fiscal 15. Certainly we always want to retain our high quality faculty and staff. We want to continue to collaborate with the finance planning team, and we want to meet certainly our state mandates. Moving on to the budget drivers, I think there was 5 main budget drivers that really guided the FY15 budget process. Special education services, again, certainly a major budget driver. The new building operational costs, the loss of one-time revenue sources, contractual salary obligations, and then of course the NRPS 2016 year 3 documents. I'm going to move to the next slide and talk about each one of these, because this next slide lists all those 5 budget drivers I just mentioned, and it actually has the numbers and the percent of our total budget increase referenced there as well. So special education costs now account for over 27% of our general fund budget proposal. In prior years, that percent amount was closer to 25%, so you certainly see the need to meet our special education costs are continuing to be on the rise.
Michael, can you just clarify, that's both in town and out of district, correct? In
That's
district and
correct.
out of district.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, the 27% I just references all special education salaries, expenses, contractual services, as well as our out-of-district costs. So, in total, we have seen an increase in the need for additional outside placements, predominantly through student move-ins. The need to deliver certain services to students and meet their needs. They required some additional outside placements, so that's certainly a big part of this 538,583 number that I'm referencing here on the slide. We've also seen a significant increase in the cost of services to meet our needs of students, in particular ABA services for students on the autism spectrum. So again, as students require new services to meet their needs, we've certainly seen certainly an increase in fiscal 14 of these costs, as you've been hearing from me as they move throughout the fiscal year, and these costs are carrying over into our fiscal 15 budget proposal. The next item, major driver, was the new operational costs at the $223,272 amount listed here, almost about 1% of our total budget request. I gave a detailed presentation on these costs in December, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but certainly we want to open the new high school, and there are certain costs that go along with that, involving new building maintenance costs, which include costs associated with maintaining the new wastewater treatment plant. So there will be certainly a cost to maintain that. We are taking in bids and proposals for engineering and operation services of that plant as we speak this week. The school department will see an increase in the utility costs next year. This mainly is the result of the need to operate the old high school for one more year. So that old high school needs to be still operated as that becomes the middle school. So because we have this increased square footage of the old high school and about 70% of the new building, there's a one-year blip in our utility costs. We fully expect that when the new building is fully functional in fiscal year 16, we're going to actually see a considerable savings as we begin to operate the green design, the efficiency design of that new building, but we have to get through fiscal 15 first. There's also additional technology expenses necessary to maintain and support the robust wireless network infrastructure that will equip the new building. The district has relied on the third major driver, loss of one-time revenue sources, so the $190,000 referenced there. So the district has heavily relied over, in particularly on fiscal 14, where we had a modest 1.8 budget increase on non-reoccurring revenue sources. As a result, there is less revenue sources available to offset the general fund budget request, resulting in the need to shift more expenses back into the operating budget. This is mainly the loss of that IDA federal grant, that $25,000 I just referenced. You may recall we used all of the SEAM trust account in fiscal 14, this current fiscal year, to help offset our district tuitions costs. There's no longer a SEAM trust account to pull from. That was $140,000 in fiscal 14, so those funds also had to be moved back into the operating budget. Those are the two main losses of revenue. The budget proposal I'm going to get to in a moment. I'm not going to discuss in detail here on this slide, but it also includes some additional user fee increases. I'm sure you read about that in the budget book. It's not something, certainly a challenge to talk about user fee increases, but it does include some increases to help offset the loss of revenue sources as we approach fiscal 15. Salary obligations, these are our contractual obligations in terms of step advancements, lane advancements, longevity increases, COLA increases to our teaching staff. Fiscal 15 represents the third year of the teacher contract. That is actually the more expensive year of the contract, in the sense that teachers are due to receive a 2% COLA increase, as well as their step advancement on the 46th day. So you may recall that advancement was on the 92nd day this year, halfway through the year. Kicks in a third of the way through the year next year. So that step advancement amount is a little bit higher than it has been currently.
Michael, I wanted just to point out,
Sure.
I believe the first year there was no step, correct?
I think
It was 2%
there was no
cost of
step
living,
raise, that's
no
right.
step.
Okay.
The second year, it was
halfway.
halfway through the year, and
Now
this
it's a
year, it's
Okay.
a third,
Yep.
third of the way through, quarter of the way
So
through.
we're also negotiating with our other bargaining units, the paraprofessional, custodial, food service, central office staff, clerical staff. So we've included a salary pool, based on the anticipated outcome of those contractual collective bargaining in the budget proposal as well. So at NRPS 2016 year 3, that is the other major budget driver. Certainly this guides our new initiatives and our decisions, and we certainly want to continue to achieve and move the district forward, and this is a very comprehensive document that guides our educational decisions. So this total impact is $135,054. It's about a 0.55% increase of our total budget. These increases I'll get into detail later, but certainly includes a digital learning coordinator that we've been certainly in need of, a 0.5 middle school health teacher, and a 0.2 computer teacher. Certainly these positions are very much needed, and I'll certainly talk about them in more detail later on in the presentation. Some other points of our overview of our budget that I wanted to talk about. I'm going to get into a little bit of enrollment a little bit later as well, but enrollment district-wide is projected to go down. It's fluctuating amongst levels, as you can see in a later chart. But budget proposal does include several enrollment adjustments from our professional and support staff, as we did a careful look at caseloads and enrollment across system-wide. And it does include about $285,000 reduction in terms of what we're calling enrollment adjustments. We did meet with certainly the administrative team. This was a difficult process as well, but we did identify about a 5% of expense reductions, which is the reason why we're not calling this a complete level service budget, with the administrative team. As you may recall, their expense budgets were level funded for about 5 consecutive years, and this budget proposal represents a less than level funded expense reductions. It also eliminates small capital and equipment as well. So that amount was about a little over $100,000. This next amount, again, the increase in user fees, I'm going to get into it in detail later on, but that includes accounted for about $68,000 of additional revenue, which again helped offset the other loss of revenue sources that we were receiving. I'll get into it in detail, but it involves the bus user fee, the athletic third sport user fee, and the extracurricular fee. Moving on, just a snapshot of our FY15 budget. As you can see, between how it compares to FY14 and FY15, these are the major categories we've looked at in the past. Salaries accounting for about a 2.3% increase. Our instructional expenses, about 8%. Operations and maintenance, 8.5%. Transportation, 23.3%. And tuitions, out-of-district tuitions, 37.2%. So I just went through the drivers with you in detail. And I think this chart also speaks to some of those drivers at play. Certainly the special education costs, that's what's certainly driving these large increases, the 23.3 and the 37.2. The utilities and the new high school operational expenses is certainly driving this 8.5% increase here. The contractual NRPS and contractual salary obligations is driving this 2.3. And even though our expense reductions and our instructional expenses are going down, in part because we have our contractual service increases, in particular special education costs is partly why you're seeing this 8% increase here. So this is all netting out to a little over $1.2 million increase over FY fiscal 14, a $26,892,029 budget proposal, and it's a 4.9% increase over fiscal 14. Next is just another pie chart that just talks about in the major expense categories, the piece of what's making up our budget. As is typical, salaries and compensation account for 81.8% of our total budget request. The next biggest piece is this light blue, that's tuition, so about 6.6% of our out-of-district costs is the next second largest piece. About 3% of the budget is for utilities, supplies and materials, and contracted services. That's these columns here. And then, transportation is rounding out about just under 2% of our requests. So this is, pretty typical from what I've seen over the last, several years. I did go back and take a look at it. And, last year, I believe salaries were making up about 83%. The special education out-of-district costs, I think because of the one-time large offsets, that amount was actually down to 5% last year, a little over 5%. So we're up to 6.6% of FY15 budget. Moving on to enrollment projections, we did a pretty detailed look at our enrollment projections. There's a detailed about a 6 to 7 page document that goes through our enrollment projections in your packet. A lot of that was guided by the report that NESDEC puts out annually as well. And the highlighted green here, that's our actuals for 2012, 13, 14. And when you get into the blue, you see those are actually our next 5-year projections. So overall, we're sitting at about 2,612, and this is October 1 enrollment counts in fiscal 14. 5 years out in fiscal 19, district-wide enrollment is projected to be 2,470. That is a decline of about 142 students over the next 5 years. So then when you look at amongst level, that's what this chart is here, what's happening at the elementary level, middle school, and the high school level. The elementary level, K through 5, is expected to go from 29 students next year, a decline of 29 students next year from 1,116 to 1,087. Then it's mainly going to remain relatively stable over the next 5 years. So projections indicate about a loss of 29 students, but then it's going to remain relatively stable. Where you see the largest decline is at the middle school level. We're at about 682 right now. We're projected to lose about 32 students next year, and that decline is expected to continue really over the next 5 years as these larger classes move on into the high school. Now, where you see the increase in enrollment is at the high school level. We're at 756 currently. And as these high middle school classes move on into the high school, as well as that survival ratio that's always sat at about a 12% loss of students going from 8th to 9th, because of the new building, because of a lot of factors, we don't anticipate that percent holding true over the next several years. So these enrollment projections over the next 4 years show that the high school enrollment could potentially cap off in fiscal 18 at 849 students. That's an increase of about 93 students over the next 4 years. So that's certainly where we need to sort of focus our staffing, enrollment-driven requests as we approach fiscal year 15 and beyond. These are the new positions that is certainly guiding. The first 3 are certainly positions that are certainly NRPS 2016 document is guiding. The 3 major strategy areas certainly are teaching and learning, student services, and technology integration. The budget priorities identified below certainly directly connected to these 3 strategy areas. So again, it's about $135,000 total requests, an increase of 0.55%. But certainly this position, digital learning coordinator, is certainly very much needed in the district to bring on the support, to integrate technology, and to certainly oversee the staff, as well as the increased equipment and devices and infrastructure that we'll have at the new building. And certainly the 0.5 middle school health teacher and 0.2 computer teacher to really deliver the curriculum needed at the middle school level to meet the social and emotional needs of staff and so forth. Those positions are very much needed. Certainly, the high school teacher, this proposal, budget proposal includes an addition of a 1.0 high school teacher, and that's specifically to try to maintain those class sizes. As you saw, the additional 40-plus students expected to come on to the high school next year. So the proposal does include these 4 new, at least 4 FTE increases. Total school budget, all sources. We're looking at about $26,892,029 total budget FY15 request. Our grants and revolving accounts, our various federal grants, transportation revolving account, circuit breaker revolving account, and so forth, account for about a little over $2.4 million. So our total FY15 school funds budget is $29,297,529. I will note that this is about a 4% increase from fiscal 14. So our fiscal 14 amount, this amount in fiscal 14 was $2.5 million, a little over $2.5 million. So we've lost about $107,000 in grants and revolving revenue. So even though our general fund appropriation request is going up by 4.9, if you look at the whole picture between the revenue that we're losing, it's actually just about a 4.4% increase request.
So Michael, this doesn't include any of the fixed costs that the town spends for the school's insurance, retirement, et cetera, correct?
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
so that's coming off, the fixed costs.
But when the state assesses per pupil expenditures, they include all of that.
That's correct.
Right.
They do. Yep. Yep, this is just school funds only, you're right. It doesn't include the other insurances and stuff that's, our town expenses are contributed to the school when you look at the per pupil expenditures and
Right.
net school spending and so forth. So the next couple of slides, I do want to take a moment to talk about the user fee proposals that are within your fiscal 15 budget. Again, these were not certainly easy decisions that the administrative team kind of came to in this proposal. The athletic user fee, the current fee structure is $400 for the first sport, $200 for a second sport, and then $100 for your third sport. So in looking to try to help the revenue picture and offset the loss of those revenue, this was a proposal to increase or maintain that third sport at $200. So it would be a $100 increase to those athletes participating in a third sport. Analysis showed there's about 100 students that participate in 3 sports. So increasing that fee by $100 would lead to about a $10,000 increase. The extracurricular fee, it's currently $125 for all high school and middle school students to participate in an extracurricular club or activity. On average, there's about 360 or so students that participate at the high school and middle school in extracurricular activities, paying that $125 fee. So this proposal would increase that fee by $50, and it would account for about additional $18,000 as a revenue offset against the FY15 budget. The third user fee proposal is increasing the busing fee from $250 to $300, and moving the family cap from $450 to $500. Revenue projections, our analysis indicates that this would account for about a $40,000 increase to help that loss of revenue offset for transportation next year. So total net impact of these user fee increases would be an additional $68,000 in revenue. The next chart, these are currently our benchmark communities, comparable communities that the DESE publishes on an annual basis. So I tried to put a chart together just to kind of show you what's happening amongst these three fees, as well as the parking fee, and what other communities are doing. So again, North Reading sitting at this is our current rates, $400, $200, $100. We have that tiered structure, $1,200 family cap, $125 extracurricular, then the $250, $450. The $450 is the family cap for busing. We currently don't have a parking fee. So you can kind of see how we would compare to our comparable communities. Georgetown is also on the high end of the athletic user fee and a tiered structure. Most of these communities don't have this tiered. They just charge per sport, per student fee. So on average, this averages out to be about $250 a sport. So that kind of puts us very comparable with these other communities that are just charging $300 per season or $200 per season.
That's $300 per season and not $300 for the whole year?
Correct. Yeah, this is looking at a per sport basis.
I wouldn't compare anything to Georgetown. They don't spend anything on education, so they're the lowest spending per pupil in the state. So I wouldn't compare anything to them.
Okay.
I mean, obviously we need the comparison, but they don't spend anything out of the town appropriation for education.
And looking at the extracurricular, you kind of get a sense of where North Reading falls. Certainly 125s and Groton Dunstable's at 150. Some of these communities, for Reading, for instance, have kind of depending on what it is, some of the performing arts fees are a little bit higher in Reading. They have a range there. And then the busing fee, we're at $250 to $450. Some of these other communities are a little bit higher. Some are able to not provide a busing fee. Some of these regionals don't charge busing because they receive a reimbursement. Keep in mind, they're receiving a state reimbursement as a regional district. All right, so that is there for your information. I'm going to move on to the presentation. Certainly, efforts at cost containment. We certainly work hard to save and find any areas of cost-saving measures. This year, school expense budgets, I mentioned it earlier, that 5% expense reduction. We certainly always purchase from state bid lists and purchasing collaboratives and consortiums to make sure we're getting the biggest savings out there available. From a utilities, natural gas and electricity standpoint, we modulate boilers. The occupancy schedules that we put into place certainly help run an efficient operation and cut costs when spaces are not being occupied. In terms of the gas rates, we participate in the Power Options Consortium, and by doing that, it allows us to watch the gas market and lock in at an optimal time. And I will say that the decision to do that and not rely on state contract pricing and certainly has saved the district a considerable amount of funds, and we're in the process of doing that and trying to find an optimal time right now. In terms of our special education costs, we continue to commit to trying to keep students in our schools through the design of customized programming. Certainly, the program this year is undergoing a lot of transition, with an interim director and assistant director, but they're certainly, working with our staff to continue to look at, how that can be done. With SEAM Collaborative, we share our transportation costs, and I've done some analysis on this, and it does prove that we do save annually between $40,000 and $50,000 by the other 14 sending districts by sharing our transportation costs with them. So when another student is on the van from another community, that cost is shared. We have memberships with SEAM and North Shore, 2 collaborative memberships, which show that we're getting, when we do use SEAM and North Shore for either our district programs or services, we're getting a reduced rate. Next steps in the process. So we certainly need to have ongoing discussions with the finance planning team about available revenue. So this is really a beginning in the process to start deliberations, to start discussions. Our present gap, based on this proposal, the 4.9%, is at about a little over $500,000. We have another meeting with the finance planning team on Friday, March 14th. We'll continue to share this information and talk about budgets and next steps and the overall revenue picture. We need to schedule a school committee budget workshop in the very near future. I know Superintendent Willis has some dates to propose this evening. The public hearing will take place in the large group room at the middle school on April 7th. We will hear some feedback from the public and continue to discuss the budget. We're currently scheduled to present our budget to the Finance Committee on April 9th. The school committee is scheduled to vote the budget on April 28th. To have the warrants ready for town meeting, which is on June 2nd. We continue to await state budget actions. I know the budget's moving through the House. There's some information out there that local revenue and local aid may be increased, and that's moving through. So hopefully, this will get some more concrete information as that budget moves through the House into the Senate through April, and then continue our discussions and so forth, and solicit feedback on our budget proposal. So at that point, that is the presentation, and I guess I'll open it up to any questions.
I guess before we get into questions, my question is, how much nitty-gritty detail do we want to dig into tonight before we have a budget hearing or two? I mean, obviously, anybody can ask questions about anything, but I don't think we ought to spend extensive time tonight when...
Well, I think Michael mentioned that we need to schedule our budget workshop, and
Right.
at that time, lots of times we get into a more granular,
Right.
detailed discussion.
Right. I mean, as I said, anybody, I didn't read this whole thing because it would have taken me 3 or 4 weeks, and we only got it last Friday, so I didn't really have time.
I read it all.
Did you? Yeah, okay.
And Michael has copies for the finance planning team.
I do.
The finance planning team on Friday will receive their copies as well.
Is this on the website also, or no?
Not yet, no.
It'll go tomorrow. I'll get
Okay.
it up, everything up.
We
on the
needed to
website.
make the presentation to you
Okay,
first.
so that said, open for any questions. I have plenty, but...
Quick question. Mel was trying to clarify this for me. That $500,000 number
Yes.
includes what? Does that include the deficit, the increase in special education services, the new operational costs,
Yep.
the loss of one-time revenue?
That includes,
Salary obligations, that includes everything?
right, so the most recent revenue picture from the finance planning team, would allow the school department to have, a budget increase of 3%. So our proposal is about 4.9%, and that is and that includes everything we just talked about, special education increases, the new operational costs, all those drivers.
Does that $500,000 number contemplate the user fee increases?
It does.
Okay.
It does.
So the gap is going down, so if we wait about 6 weeks, can we get it down to zero? I mean.
We hope so. We hope so.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to comment that usually at this time, we see an over $1 million budget gap between what
Right.
the town has identified as an appropriation and what we have identified in terms of a modified level services budget. So as I started this conversation this evening, we've already taken a look at the FY14 budget and peeled back as much as we feel we can at this point in order to continue to provide a modified level services budget with a budget gap of about $500,000. And if we added the user fees, it would increase by about $68,000.
I see that as a $568,000 increase.
Right, I do too. The enrollment adjustment of $285,000, how is that reflected? Where are we saving money on the enrollment adjustment?
We reduced teachers at the elementary level, but we have to add a teacher at the high school. So there's a trade-off. We also reduced 2 teachers at the middle school because we're going to be sending 40 students to the high school. But we're asking to increase 0.5 health teacher and 0.2 computer science teacher.
So the overall staff adjustments results in a net savings of $285,000?
Yes.
And that maintains class size to our satisfaction? And
It increases class size at one grade level in one of the elementary schools. That's a bit higher than we would like.
So this is the issue we have here, in that we're in a bad place right now, because we aren't addressing, in my opinion, the critical need for staffing at the high school. One teacher doesn't come close to achieving what we need, and we can't reduce staffing that we'd like to at the elementary level because we cannot consolidate yet, because we have too many students to go from 4 sections to 3, or 3 sections to 2.
Correct.
However, I will say that I would like to get a close look at that, because while maybe there might be some unpalatable choices that have to be made, I think we have to take a close look at consolidating at the elementary level. So I'm assuming that at our budget workshops, we can,
Yes.
we can do that.
We have that information for the budget workshop.
But to me, in a nutshell, that's the big problem. People see declining enrollment, and they say, well, you should be able to cut the budget. What? But it doesn't work that way.
Right. It's spread out over 3 schools.
Right.
And 6 grades in
And
each.
particularly when we're talking about 20 students, that doesn't translate into any savings whatsoever if there's a 20, at least for this next fiscal year,
Right.
school year. 20 students, it might as well be 4 or 5 or 8 or 30. I mean, it's not going to change
Yeah.
staffing. But I see it, the problem I see is that if you look at the budget drivers, the special education services, the new operational costs, the loss of one-time revenue, the salary obligations, those are all out of our control, every single one of them. There's not a thing we can do to contain or to reduce those costs. The only thing we have any control over is NRPS 2016. Other than that, so it becomes a question of finding additional revenues or making cuts someplace else. At least that's the way I see it. I don't see.
You're correct,
You're
Mr.
correct.
Yeah.
That's
So-
correct. Yeah.
All right.
Mr. Chair, may I
Yes.
suggest a date for the budget workshop?
Mhm.
If we could get that scheduled, that would be much appreciated.
Okay.
We're proposing Thursday, March 20th in the evening. We usually meet around 6 or 6:30. That's what we have in the past. Doesn't mean we have to do it that way, but,
It's one of the 2 meetings we get food.
yes, that's correct.
I would rather start earlier and get,
Whatever you would,
is 6 o'clock okay?
On what
So,
date?
Cliff, can you do that, 20th?
Thursday,
Thursday,
March
20th,
20th.
Jerry, all right?
It's my top priority.
How early would you like to start?
Michael,
6?
that work?
Yeah, I think so. John, we moved that to March 19th, right, the CIPC.
Is that
We
Thursday?
did, yeah.
Yeah, I
think that
believe
could
it's
work.
the 19th.
Yeah. we can work.
March
You okay with that?
20th.
Yeah.
All right, so budget meeting,
Budget workshop,
Thursday, 20th at 6 PM?
6
PM, okay?
Central office conference room still work for you?
Yep. Okay.
And that will be a working session with, and I will take care of the food.
Any other questions, comments from Michael?
That's the question.
Sure. Jeff?
On the FY15 budget screen there, you have like the 5 big drivers: salaries, instructional expenses, operation, transportation, tuition. Bingo. That transportation,
Yep.
is that out-of-district placement type?
It's, that's,
Transportation, is it busing?
that's both. That's regular ed transportation, which is significantly offset by the revolving fund, because the fees that we take in.
Okay, so the part that's on there from regular school buses is the part, the piece of it that the fees don't cover?
So, right, so fees help offset the cost of our regular school busing. So we run about 10 buses annually for
Yeah.
our regular school busing, and the fees cover about 5 of those buses. So,
So that's the difference.
I think that's the entire cost.
That's the entire
not-
cost.
That's the
That's the
entire
entire
cost.
cost.
The entire cost,
Yeah.
and then the revenue comes in someplace
Right.
else.
So
So that
offsets it.
transportation about, I mean, 'cause some of that transportation really is more like tuitions, it's more.
this,
like
this
the-
transportation cost is, it's regular transportation and special education transportation.
Rough idea about how much that.
So
divides up.
about, out of this 427 amount, I would say about, I can tell you exactly, 250,000 of that is regular ed transportation. So the remaining of that is special education. And then that, and special education is offset by IDA grants, and so forth as well. Our IDA federal major sped grant takes into account, offsets about 300,000 or so of our transportation costs, a little more than that, 325,000.
So probably, so that 1.7, 1.8 million in tuition, probably another couple 100,000 really is transportation, to out-of-district placements type of thing, so
Yeah,
it's really more like a $2 million.
$2 million cost.
Put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
It's about 2.5.
Marcy, you have a question? Or Don?
I have several questions.
Okay.
Okay, you might be sorry that you reminded me of this tonight.
It's all right.
I have a question about the new operational costs.
Sure.
Two things. You said it was a one-year blip in utility cost. Is that the delta, the middle school gets turned over to Gilbane next year, and they make
Correct.
the utility costs. So is that the, sort of the delta between the size of the existing middle school and the larger size of the existing high school?
That's a big, yeah. That's a,
I think it's also maintaining
predominantly.
utilities at the middle school while the renovations are going on as
Right.
well.
So,
No.
no, that's
Not at all.
Gilbane.
That's all
That's
costs by
Gilbane, yeah.
Gilbane? All
That's
right.
Gilbane.
So we're dealing with about an additional, I want to say it was, close to $100,000 of additional square footage area next year to operate that old
Because the
high
high
school.
school is bigger than the existing
Correct.
high school, the existing high school.
Correct. So that's a large piece of that cost.
And with there being a somewhat smaller student population moving to the high school than leaving the high school,
Yeah.
is it possible to shut off, maybe the modular cafeteria?
We're moving
or
there
wing-
too.
Yeah, but you're in the
Yeah.
existing middle school, so
I-
that's.
I've
counts
spoken, it's a
for the
good, I've
square
spoken
footage.
to, it's a good question. I've spoken to Wayne Hardica, Director of Building and Grounds, and it's difficult to do that. I mean, we'll certainly try to modulate, it's an old building, and it's difficult to just say a piece of that building is not gonna need to be, functionable in terms of gas and electricity at any point in the day.
I just wanted to ask.
Yeah, he's certainly looked into it, it's difficult to do.
Okay, and is there any offset from not maintaining, so you're gonna have the sewage treatment plant,
Correct.
but you won't be maintaining the septic at the middle school, so you'll be maintaining one
we still
septic
do.
and the sewage
I
treatment
think
plant
that's, yeah.
Yeah,
next year.
we'll be
And is there any
maintaining.
offset from not having to deal with the septic at the existing middle school for 1 year?
It's very minimal. I mean, I think
It's not,
it might be three,
not big money.
yeah, like 3
It's
or
not
4.
big money.
I want to say it's $3,000 or
Pump it out.
$4,000
Okay,
of
okay.
flushing, of annual
Right.
flushing. It's so minimal. The tank, I think does it like twice a year, and it's about $3,000 or
Like, what
$4,000.
are we looking at, $100,000 expenditure for the?
$100,000 is the amount we're carrying for the wastewater treatment plant, and that was, various consultants worked on what that amount should be. We're taking in the engineering bids tomorrow, actually. We'll have an idea of what those bids came in at, and we're taking in the operations and maintenance piece of that plant on
Right.
March 19th. So by the end of this month, we'll know exactly, but we think it's going to be close to 100,000.
I think it's important to point out too, just while Marcy's on this line of questioning, is that we have foregone hiring an additional custodian for the next
Correct.
fiscal year, which I don't understand why or how, but should be pointed out.
Wayne said that he
He can do without for the next year,
Can do without.
which I think is gonna be difficult,
Yeah,
but.
and this is
Square
by no
footage.
way, I'm just trying to.
Yep.
No, that's
look
good. No,
at
yeah,
it,
absolutely.
Make sure I understand it, and
Yeah.
if there are any, savings anywhere. I mean, I know you come through this and do a wonderful job. The enrollment adjustments, that will be attrition, by attrition, I assume?
Yes.
You don't, and no unemployment benefits or anything like that. You hope it to be by attrition?
Yes,
I'm
for the
sorry,
most
no.
part, Marcy, it's going to depend also as far as what licenses we need, but yes, we're looking at attrition.
And you said that there are 2 teachers at the middle school.
Yes,
Fewer. Will those 2 teachers be moving to the high school?
depends on the license that they currently have and whether or not they can move seamlessly
But
from the
will
middle
the net
school.
number of teachers, so those teachers net will move up to the high school? So while you're adding 1 position at the high school, you'll be
No.
moving 2 more positions?
No,
We're adding 1 position at the high school,
that's
Right.
it.
and we're eliminating 2 at the middle school.
And those 2 are not moving? at the
That's
high school?
correct.
So how does that work if there are 40 more students at the high school? 1 teacher could be certain subjects, but not cover English, math, science.
It
and-
Well, it's an FTE of 1.0, but it's really, .2 will be English language arts, .2 will be
Oh.
mathematics, so it's the
Oh, okay.
equivalent of 1.0.
Oh, okay, I see, so sort of 1 classroom in each subject ability there, okay.
Yes, that's,
Okay, and then I had a numbers question.
mhm.
On the FY15 budget slide, under salaries, the dollar change is $499,072.
What page?
Right there.
Right here,
Page
yeah.
3,
Oh,
and
page
then
I didn't know what you were going to
page
ask.
3.
It's a,
And then on the bottom slide on page 2, the increase in salary obligation is $565,999. Can you tell me why, what's
Right.
included, what's different?
Yeah, I know what that is.
And then if I add the instructional expenses, it
So,
doesn't add up.
the 565 is in particular for our obligations. So we have, if you look at, a lot of different factors go into that salary number. You have our costs of steps and lanes, our cost of COLA, and that all adds up to 565. But that's not the exact increase, because we're also backing out enrollment-driven adjustments. The 285 is coming out, the 135 is going in. So there's various factors at play driving what our bottom line salary amount is.
So those are sort of apples and oranges, those two lines? Just the-
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the first one is
Yeah.
if we kept every teacher we had
Right.
today,
Yeah.
made no
Oh, I see.
changes,
Right.
didn't hire anybody new, that would be what the change would be, right?
Okay.
Correct.
5 something.
Yeah, there is status quo. We just carried all FTE forward, contractual obligations, didn't hire any new staff, didn't, look at enrollment-driven reductions. It would be 565.
Okay. And then just two more, if you don't mind indulging me.
Nope.
On the enrollment projections,
Okay.
if I'm reading this correctly, in the last two lines, 2017-18 and 18-19, the elementary population is actually a little higher, just a touch higher than it is now. But the middle school population is significantly lower than it is now. Why would that be?
We have some smaller classes right now, right? Who
We have
will be-
smaller classes moving from the
Oh,
elementary
so
to the
it's not,
middle.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so,
Yes,
It's not
and then more
like-
births.
Right.
Okay.
More births,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, okay.
And it's also a survival ratio that goes into play between grades 5 and 6.
Yeah, no, I knew that, but I see it's
Yeah.
not linear, it's not the same year, of course. Okay, thank you, that
Thank
clarifies
you.
it. And then on the
Big
new
difference.
positions,
Mhm.
with the larger class size moving up from the middle school, and also I had the privilege of attending one of the NEAS parents sessions. I have a question about the guidance counselor. I know that's something Mr. Bernard has asked for several years. The NEAS made reference to the guidance counselor being at capacity, and now there's going to be 40 more students in the high school. Obviously you've prioritized here, but I guess I just wanted to give that feedback, that it seems to me that a guidance counselor.
We agree that that is
Priority.
important. It is a priority. With some of the extraordinary challenges that we're facing this year, we wanted to make sure that we got the classroom teacher, the equivalent of a 1.0 FTE in, and deferring the additional counselor for one more year.
Yeah, I guess, I know this isn't a hearing, but feedback would be, especially as that large ninth grade moves up and needs college counseling, that's.
That's something the
Marcy,
chairman's been pushing this
I've been
hard.
pushing for this for
No,
3 or
I know
4
you
years.
have,
And I know
I
we're,
know why it has to happen.
I know we're within the guidelines in terms of state guidelines, but in my opinion, we have way too many
Yeah.
students
And it's
per
becoming
guidance
even
counselor.
more
And it's getting
Right.
worse, yeah.
As ninth grade moves
And
into
that
10.
enrollment's
that's
not going down,
plus
Marcy.
16.
Even after this next year, it's just going to continue to increase.
Right.
I think we put it off for as long as we can,
Yeah.
Mrs. Daly. I agree with you.
Okay. Well, thank you for the presentation, and I'll look forward to watching the process unfold.
Don?
Just a question on the, one of your drivers is special ed, and it always is a driver. I'm just curious about the anticipated level of circuit breaker this year.
Sure.
I know there is a lag in the circuit breaker. but
Right.
Your special ed costs have been going up
Right.
as they have. How much more are we expecting in special ed?
So we actually, the amount that we're expecting next year, the amount that we're included in our proposal offset is $715,000. And that is actually the same amount used in fiscal 14. Now, what's behind that is yes, our expenditures are always a year behind. So our expenditures this year have been higher than last year in fiscal 14. So our reimbursement amount will be larger next year. So we're assuming a percent ratio of 70%. And that is the most recent guidance we've gotten from the Department of Education, the School Finance Office, the governor's proposal, pretty much level funded that amount, and it was about 5% this year. So we think a 70% is a pretty conservative number. And the reason why it's not going up, you would think, why is it staying at 715 and not higher than this year? Is because this year's $715,000 amount is based on a level, some one-time reserves that were available from prior years that are being used this year.
Yeah.
We carried
So
forward.
we carried
rate
forward.
from a
We carried
previous
forward.
year.
So now we're not going to have any carry forward, and we're actually, unfortunately, the higher percent ratio that we're proposing and the higher cost, so the higher claim and the higher percent is helping keep that amount level. Otherwise, it would have to go down. Our original proposal had that amount going down by about, significantly, but we're hoping it's going to be at 70% next year. Yeah.
You know, I think the major challenge with special education is more state and federal funding, because, obviously there's a commitment to educate every student, but you can't put the whole burden on the local community, and the state doesn't. But the state does require us to pay the first $40,000 of each out-of-district tuition, and I think that they could somehow, or the federal government could somehow figure out how to lower that number and reimburse the local districts more. Clearly, that would be a huge help to
Right,
not only
right.
us, but every district in the state. I did have one question on the special ed costs, and Michael and I feel bad for the guy, I've been badgering him with phone calls since I got this on Friday afternoon. But I noted that, and this has never made sense to me, the state claims the average per pupil cost for out-of-district tuition is $21,000. We are going to spend, in this budget, $48,000 per special ed student out of the district. Towns like Wellesley spend $108,000, Reading spends $80,000, and I guess I don't understand that from $21,000 to $108,000. It just doesn't make any sense to me as a non-educator trying to understand why that is. Do you have any?
Well, Michael, you did some investigating into this. I can
Yeah.
tell you that the outside placement is based on the needs of the student. And some tuitions, as you know, the range in what an outside placement costs varies from what we pay
Right.
for a collaborative to an outside placement for extraordinary care.
Right.
And the range can be huge. And depending upon how many students you have that require that level of service in an outside placement determines the total cost of expenditure on an outside placement budget.
But I guess my question is, the puzzling thing is, the more wealthy the community, the higher amount per special ed out-of-district tuition they're spending. And I looked at, I can tell you, I looked at a boatload of communities, and to me, the urban districts I don't understand. The urban districts are spending little, and then you have Wellesley spending $108,000 per student. I don't get it.
I think it all comes back to what services the students need, and
I can
You know,
also say,
a couple-
doesn't it depend on the grant, the IDEA offset?
this is taking into that, I think IDA grant offset.
That's a part of it.
Yeah, the larger the district, the offset's
bigger
going to be
the
larger.
IDEA.
The
Okay.
federal, the grant offset's going to be larger.
Okay.
And I actually, in response to investigated some of that question, I actually pulled out off the Operational Service Division website the current tuition rates and went through and saw all our current common placements, and you kind of browse through this document, and they're all in that $50,000 to $70,000 range per placement. So to me, our $51,000 amount that the state is listing as an average, a pure pupil, doesn't seem grossly inflated when you look at the cost per tuition amount. So I actually questioned some of the lower ones and kind of say, how is that even possible? So some of it could be, it's not always an apple-to-apple comparison based on how districts complete and report the data. Some may look at reporting this data not in the out-of-district expenditure column, maybe in more of a settlement column, which could throw off some of this data and sort of deflate that per pupil amount in some situations. So, it's not an easy comparison.
It's puzzling when you look at those numbers, yeah.
It's also
Right.
possible that some districts are underserving their population.
Correct. Or over-serving, in some cases when you're spending.
culture.
Any other
That's
questions?
possible.
Family culture.
Yeah, I think that was something that Michael and I had discussed also, where
Demands by
that demands,
families.
right, demands in certain
How the town
communities, right,
responds and
right.
sort of the culture of
Expectation
inclusion.
that the local towns are advocates for their
Exactly.
children.
Expectations of services,
Right.
just not even demanding, just.
Right.
Lack of advocacy.
Just
Exactly.
going straight, sending the bill to the town.
Which
I think
we've-
that's exactly
which
right.
we've experienced in the
Right.
past. We've had that out of district
Unilateral.
placements.
Unilateral
without-
placements,
yeah,
yeah.
Unilateral placements, we've had it on a number of occasions.
Not recently, but.
No,
Yeah.
but
Any other questions or comments on the budget? Cliff? Janine?
I'd just like to thank Michael Connolly for the extraordinary amount of work he did in his first budget presentation for the North Reading Public Schools. And as we move through this process, I think you'll see that he takes the time to educate himself on what it is that we're looking to do to build the best education using the least amount of resources.
I'm just glad we don't pay him overtime, because I don't, honest to God, I'm serious, I don't know how many hours he's working, because every presentation, Mike, is spot on.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you very
Excellent
much.
job.
I did,
Thank you.
I actually did want to put, there's one chart in here which Michael didn't highlight, which we talked about today. And I'm serious when I say I probably spent 2 hours on the phone with him, and I felt bad for him today and Friday. But if you look at the history of our operating budget increases, every time we have
That's a good point.
a low increase, where we get very small percentage increase, the next year, it skyrockets.
This is page 12.
Page 12 of our
And it's
book.
generally because we're using one-time available
Right.
funds, that's why.
And, you know, you look at 2004, which I believe, was that the year we had the?
That was the
half
override.
days?
That was the override.
We have a
That's just the point.
0.28% increase,
Yeah.
and then 2005, when the
I
override
think
kicked
that
in,
was the
we had
override.
11.72. You know, 2013, well, actually, the last 4 or 5 years have been pretty consistently fairly
One of
low.
the years we got the ARA funds too, and then we lost them.
Right.
We got the ARA funds in 2009.
So then we lost them after that, so
Right.
it's always
And we used them
one-time
in
funds.
Fiscal
10 and
10 and 11, those 1.9,
Because of
1.5,
ARA funds, right?
That's ARA and
ARA
educational
funds.
job funds
Yeah.
and ARA.
Right.
Yeah,
And that's why it was low.
right. And then it jumps up to 4 and
Right.
4.8.
4 and almost
Yeah.
5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing how your costs go down when somebody else is paying the bill.
Exactly. Isn't
Yeah.
that interesting?
Exactly, Cliff.
I want to thank Michael, too. I mean, a lot of work went into this. We've got a lot of questions to ask. I tried to get through most of it over the weekend, and I'll admit that I didn't get through most of it. But it's, in addition to everything else we're working on, including the food services contract for the next year, it's got a lot going on. So appreciate the work, Michael.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have minutes, and we don't have any minutes, right? But we do have a treasure trove
An incredible treasure trove.
of executive session minutes that
Can-
range
can
from
these group-
May 27th, 2003 to August 29th, 2005, which we were voting on tonight to release to the public domain. And I'm not bragging here, I'm going to tell you that I read every single one of these,
Yeah,
mainly for entertainment purposes.
I didn't read any of them, but I was here for every one of them.
Jerry is the only member who's still here, who was here on May 27th, 2003. And I just read through to make sure that all names, et cetera, and personal information were redacted.
Redacted.
And they
Thank
are.
you.
So unless anybody has any questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from May 27th, 2003, executive session minutes, through August 29th, 2005, for release to the public domain.
So moved.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. I don't believe this. No, I wasn't. I don't believe this. I have to call on Mike. Michael's playing the role of Patrick Daly tonight. Next, we have Michael Connolly with a budget update.
Great, thank you.
Michael?
So the March 2014 budget report was included in your packets. And, again, not a lot of new information from prior reports. We've talked about special education costs and the increases we've seen this year, that we've been able to address those due to prepayments and additional revenue and circuit breaker. But again, we're going to closely monitor these expenses as we move through the fiscal year. We've experienced a very cold winter season. We're now into March, and it continues to experience a cold winter season. So certainly our budgeted, our utility expenses are certainly, higher than maybe they have been in the past, but, we very much expect these to be certainly within, budgeted line items, and, there may be a little bit less of available funds to repurpose elsewhere that we've had in the past, and we look at utilities, but we're very much still within budgeted line items. Our homeless transportation costs, we've seen a rise in these costs this year, and this is a trend that's consistent really across the state. And these are to really meet our requirements to transport students, that the homeless students living in another town to their home district. So this line is actually currently reflecting a deficit. Beginning last year, I will say that district are now eligible for reimbursement for part of these expenses. The anticipated reimbursement rate is about 50% this year. I will say it's important to note, though, that although the state certainly fought hard to get this, certainly in the budget last year, it is considered general fund revenue. So when that revenue comes in, it actually does go to the town. We've been unable to put that in a revolving account, but it certainly helps offset some of those expenses.
That truly makes no sense.
It's a difficult. It's a lot of debate last year on that, and a lot of
Especially for
lobbying to not do
Districts that
away
are
with
spending
that.
a real lot of money on
yes.
that. That's gotta be really
It's
painful for
significant.
them.
So, food service program, we're continuing to monitor that program's performance. As I said in prior reports, we'll certainly need to subsidize the program loss, this year with the operating budget. I'm still waiting for the performance of February. I'm certainly meeting with Charles Management on Friday to review February's numbers, but so we'll continue to monitor that and try to minimize that operating impact as best we can. We look at the payroll side. Again, the majority of payroll projections indicate that they are very close to budgeted lines. I did take a look at our daily substitute costs. They're actually lower than they have been in previous years this year, so we actually anticipate that we'll have a surplus in our substitute budget between now and the end of the year. And then again, to the stormy winter season, we've incurred some higher than average custodial overtime costs, but certainly the custodial payroll expenses remain within budgeted lines. So those are the highlights I wanted to reference this evening, and so open it up to any additional questions.
Questions? Michael, I have one, and maybe you don't have the answer tight. Both administration and business office on the payroll
Yep.
show deficits at the end of the year.
Right. I can
Just curious.
address that. I think in prior reports, I've talked a little bit about this. The administration line is showing a deficit, and that is a result of we're incurring sort of a kind of a double payroll expense in the sense that we have an administrator that's on leave of absence.
Oh, that's right, okay.
Who is, who
okay.
is also had, is obligated, based on our contractual obligations, she was paid for a period of that time.
Right.
And then we brought in an interim position that was
Right.
being paid. The business office, there always was sort of an offset or, an expected offset in the facility rental revolving account.
Okay, we don't-
Anticipate
yeah.
part of a business office accountant that does the scheduling and the billing. And at this point, we decided at the beginning of the fiscal year not to count on that offset
Right.
because of the funds that we used for the Bachelor parking
Right,
lot.
right.
So that's why we're reflecting a deficit there.
Okay. Anything else? Thanks, Michael. Okay, Kathy, next, I think, is staffing, nothing to report this time.
Correct.
And we do have one donation,
Yes.
and I will read this. It's the North Reading School District seeks your acceptance of a $420 donation from Little School PTO to support funds needed for a grade 2 field trip to the Museum of Science. The donation will support the admission and transportation costs for 42 students to attend the field trip. So if I could have a motion to accept with gratitude, please.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Cliff, second by Janine. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0. Okay, next we have subcommittee reports, updates. Cliff, anything additional to report on policy? We had that one policy tonight.
Yeah, we worked a little bit on the progress toward rental.
Okay.
numbers. And Jerry and I were on a subcommittee.
All right.
We went through that. We're working on a policy on that. We may modify those numbers just a little bit from what the subcommittee had. There'll be a second subcommittee working on those numbers.
Okay.
And we'll have some recommendations.
Yeah, let me know, Cliff, when you want to meet again on that, because I had some more thoughts on it, too. to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah. Whenever you're ready.
Sometime between now and our next policy meeting might be a good time.
And we're also going to bring forward or continue to work on I think Karen is working on that social media. She said she had something close to ready, so she'll turn that over to the policy subcommittee.
Yes, the next policy subcommittee is March 26th,
Okay.
so if you would be meeting before then,
Okay.
then we'd be able to address it at the next meeting.
Okay. Evaluation sub, is that it?
So we can work a time on that sometime
All right.
between now and then.
Okay. Next, Janine and I met with Kathy, the evaluation subcommittee on March 4th, and we worked on the self-assessment tool for the school committee for this year, reviewed the answers from last year, looked at whether we should add questions, remove questions. We're adding one back in that somehow fell off last year. That seems to continue to work well. Kathy presented us with a kind of a 2-year trend of scores, and that will be making its way to the committee in
April.
So that's it on that.
Just wonder what we're going to do in April.
And the next, Jerry, anything on mask legislative update?
Oh, geez, I read it, I have a headache now.
I would say, I read that, and I couldn't understand it.
Well, I'm not sure what the consequences are to us, but it's part of the Senate's version of the supplemental budget, and they're going to start counting, I guess, as part of net school spending, the cost for health insurance for retired teachers.
Right.
Now, I'm not sure what it means for us. I don't think it impacts us very much, but I may be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, we don't ever have a danger of not meeting our required net school spending.
Yeah, so
amount. We're well above.
Right.
You know, what that would mean is actually would impact your per pupil expenditure report, because now you have a larger amount.
Have they been
going into
counting
the
it to
cost.
date, or no?
So,
I don't,
Because it says if as of 1994 you weren't, it's not counted, but if you were counting it back in
okay, so it all
1994.
depends, yeah.
So I don't know if we
Right.
were or not.
1994, I think
Right.
that was obviously the education reform was
Yeah.
in 93, 94.
Yeah.
And, I mean, this is a significant amount of money. If you start looking at the cost for retired teachers'
It's
health
significant.
care,
It's
you're talking about a huge number. So if they're going to use that to impact the per pupil expenditures,
Right.
it's going to change things dramatically. And
We'll be higher than
We'll be higher than everything.
Cambridge.
No, we'll never get
No,
that
that
high. I do want to say, and one of the discussions I had with Michael is the state just released the per pupil expenditures for 2013. And it shows a significant increase for North Reading, yet it's just not an accurate portrayal of our school district. The budget, we had a small increase in the budget. I don't understand how the number of pupils they use is about 150 less than we actually had in the district. I don't know how they get that number. There's some formula or something, right?
Yeah, I looked into, so they actually take your preschool enrollment and your full-day kindergarten enrollment, because if you're taking in tuition to cover your full-day kindergarten enrollment, they actually divide those amounts by 50%.
Oh, so we
which-
lose all those
So
students.
you lose all those students. So if
So-
you do that and look at the additional enrollment.
But
you
they
actually
shouldn't
get
do
to the
that
amount.
because we're using that money to fund the program, so they should count.
They try to look at what you're financially, responsible for. And, legally, you have to, provide a half-day program.
Right.
So they look at all the additional costs beyond, students beyond the half-day. That's why they divide it by 50%. And, and then they come up with that enrollment amount that they use.
The other issues that Michael and I talked about were, I don't think communities are, you're not comparing apples to apples, because communities put things in different
Right.
categories.
Yeah, it's-
And,
Yeah, but aren't they supposed to all use the same,
Yeah, but,
essentially the same
for example,
formula?
Jerry, you go in there, it says we spend
Yeah.
like it's almost 30% more than the state average on athletics per student. You explain to me how that,
Yeah.
we don't, you know what I mean? It's just,
And again, I'm not sure whether I'm not sure what they're counting either, whether they're
Right.
counting revolving accounts, whether they're counting appropriations, or.
I mean, the state chart of accounts, function and object codes that they put out, and it's supposed to try to, put everyone on that apple-to-apple comparison. But within that guidelines, there's still a level of interpretation by various, finance directors, business
Right.
managers, so it's never going to be an
Right.
exact apple-to-apple comparison. There's good guidelines there, and I think for the most part that, it's close, but it's never going to be exact.
And essentially, you're only getting an average based on the information or the data that each district's putting
Right.
into the formula, too.
And if
That's
we have a
right.
higher percentage of kids doing athletics, then the
Yeah.
athletic heart would raise.
Hi, right.
Yeah.
And then that would be divided out, and it would show a different number there, be different than other people. So,
But I did talk to Michael about possibly, I just have a lot of questions about this, because one of the things I like to see is, cost per pupil is fine, but I'd like another category, which is cost per, or the education cost per pupil. And I'm just saying, I know we have to pay all these things, I'd like to put the insurance over here, I'd like to put the pensions over here, whatever is included, the maintenance that,
Get a more accurate figure.
I'd like to see, what are we actually spending, per pupil on teachers, instructional materials, et cetera? To me, that's, I know everything else counts, but that would give you a better apples to apples in terms of how we're educating our students, because $5 million in benefits isn't educating our students. I guess that's, so one thing I suggested to Michael, and I think he agreed, is maybe having him invite someone from the DESE to come in some night and not necessarily make a presentation, but if they want to make a brief presentation,
Make a short
give us a chance, give us a chance to ask some questions.
Sure. That
About-
might be our summer meeting. We could bring somebody
Yeah,
in.
maybe during the summer, yeah. So, yeah,
Good.
Brad Jones might be good to invite to that too. Maybe invite Brad and Bruce Tarr also. That's a good idea, Cliff. We could have them all here
Rick
for one meeting.
Jones, Senator Tarr, and
Focus
Michael just
group.
mentioned the name of a person that he thinks would be good to
Yeah.
bring in.
We
Okay.
could probably talk a little bit about Chapter 74. at the
That'd be a
same
good
time.
idea too, to talk about Chapter 74, yeah.
That's a great idea. We might want, if I may suggest, you might even want to think about inviting other school committees from surrounding towns.
Sure.
This is a regional
We could invite
conversation.
Judy, right?
Judy Diamond.
Judy Diamond from
Judy
the-
Diamond.
Right.
Mrs. Diamond.
actually, the best time to do that would be sometime after the 1st of September, so we have a better venue.
Oh, that's a good idea.
That's a
Very
very,
good
if
idea.
that works for
Much
you,
better venue.
maybe one of our early September meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
One other note under legislative issues, that I thought this was interesting. A couple of school systems, school boards in Massachusetts have sent letters to the state telling them that they're going to give parents the option to opt out of park field testing. Of course, they've been told in no uncertain terms that they won't be allowed to do that. I think it's the town of Norton and the city of Worcester. However, the city of Worcester is planning to pursue that option, and they claim they're not going to back down, the school committee, and they are going to allow parents to opt out of park because it does not fall under the statute that the state is citing. And what Worcester and both Norton are saying is the teachers aren't going to see any of the scores. The scores aren't going to be used to evaluate the teachers or administrators.
Useless
Right,
teaching.
right.
Useless
So,
testing.
I think this is going to be interesting to watch.
Mm.
Another thing I'll point out is some state legislators have taken votes on delaying implementation of the Common Core. I know the state of New York is one of them. And I know we're moving along on that,
Mhm.
but that's also something we should keep an eye on.
Mhm.
So,
I heard today, I think California was approved to delay implementation by 1 year.
1 year. And finally, I should have sent this to all of you. I posted a link to it on Facebook. There was a great speech that Diane Ravitch gave about a month ago on Common Core. And I'll send that along to you. She gave it to some conference she was speaking at in late January. And it wasn't overly, I mean, she's critical of Common Core, but not because it's a bad idea, but because the public, it wasn't vetted. And it basically was created by the test givers, the private companies that are gonna make a lot of money out of this. And you'll notice the College Board, which is now run by the guy who was also a bigwig on creating the Common Core, is now changing the SATs, and they're doing a deal with Khan Academy to provide us. It's all a money-making kind of, there's nothing wrong with making money, but we shouldn't be doing that on the backs of our kids in K through 12.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty safe statement to make. All right, anything else?
I have one thing. I think you mentioned it earlier, but this piece of work on the impact of
Oh, yeah.
unfunded state mandates is super.
Very good.
This is a real document, and that probably ought to get spread around a little as well.
Yeah.
Well, these are our best approximations.
Right.
might do
Again,
this
it's
well.
not scientific.
I mean, I don't know when,
I think you should
I think there's
take
two
more
people.
off.
I think maybe
Off by
Mike and me tied.
50%, it still is a powerful document.
$9 million.
$9
Imagine.
million.
Can you imagine that?
But I think, you know, to be fair, if you go through that,
Longer topic.
there are many things that we should, even if the state didn't tell us to do them, or the government,
Yeah.
we should be doing them.
Correct.
But there are a lot of things that are just dropped on us that seem to be unnecessary, if you read through that.
And if we had that money available to work with on our own,
Right, we'd probably do a lot.
we could do a little bit better balancing of the value we get from it.
Right.
Do a little cost-benefit analysis of what we get for what we give.
Right,
And to improve things like we could teach Mandarin
exactly,
for 10 grand or so.
right.
I keep going back to that. When I say I'm behind something, I'm behind it, and we pledge to fund that
I
program,
know.
not just authorize it,
I know.
and we haven't.
One last note, and I promise it's the last one. There was an interesting conversation going on the mask email listserv this week about school committees and how much they're paid, how much school committee members are paid. And the question was put out because the city of Lynn, it was a Lynn school committee member, they currently pay members an $800 a month stipend, and they're thinking of increasing that. And so the person who put the thing on the listserv was wondering, asked urban districts, but a lot of others were weighing in, and thankfully Cliff was one of the first to weigh in, and he said, we receive nothing, we prefer to put our money into educating our students, or I think you mentioned the Mandarin course.
Once again, speaking for himself.
Right, no.
Speaking for myself,
I agree with you.
paraphrasing a
Yes.
tiny bit, I said, that $800 a month is $9,600 a year.
Right.
And personally, I can't imagine taking that money.
Right.
I can't imagine it. That would be Mandarin for our
Cliff said
class.
that would have funded our Mandarin
Yeah.
course last year.
It's crazy.
But even more interesting, it's fascinating how
It
many
got
people
further.
get paid. There are, it ranges from $300 a month, $3,000 a year, to the city of Cambridge that pays its school committee members $35,000 a year each. And I responded in a rather.
I'm moving, by the way.
How would you clarify? How would you
Can't
qualify my response? What would you? Snotty, maybe?
No.
I responded and said,
wouldn't
I
say
am shocked that any school
Outrage
committee
is-
member will be paid $35,000 a
Outrage.
year.
Actually, more like 50,000.
Yeah,
Really?
I then received a private email back from a couple of members explaining to me, I don't understand how hard the school committee members work in the city of Cambridge. And I left it at that because I didn't want to take it any
Is
further.
that so?
Yes.
I think
I'll
this
tell
is-
you. I'll tell you. Who it was.
I think it's typical for city councils and some boards of
But
selectmen to
35
get paid
yeah,
or
but
to have benefits.
35,000. It's more than the city of Boston
If
gets
that was
paid.
Patty, I'm laughing.
But the claim was, well, the city manager makes $330,000 in Cambridge, which is more than the mayor, the governor.
What does he think, he's a superintendent?
I don't know.
God, Mike.
So anyway, I just thought that was interesting because to see some of the responses, yet some people from other towns were, I can't even get reimbursed for my travel costs,
Yeah.
and then you got 35,000. The city Salem pays their members $12,000 a year. Salem, Mass.
$12,000.
$12,000 a year. So you have that's $60,000. So I'm not bringing it up tonight, but no.
Interestingly enough, back in 1991, there was a member of the Board of Selectmen who put it on the warrant for town meeting, I believe it
Right.
was, to pay the selectmen.
Yes.
And I was on the board of selectmen at the time, and I think we got pelted by tomatoes from the town meeting audience. I've never seen a reaction
Yeah,
like
that
that
was
in my
really
life,
bad,
like,
yeah.
and it was for $2,000.
Right.
It was for like $2,000.
Yeah.
And people were just up in arms about it. They were outraged over it, so.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's it.
Administrative report.
Oh, we have a minute. Oh,
I
yes.
handed it out
That's
to you.
right.
It's very quick, it's very simple.
Okay.
2 items. I just would like to bring them to your attention. One, I included in your packet is a flyer on a program that's going to be offered by the Community Impact Team, Action Team, which is the K-12 Programs and Services Action Team, of which I am the chair. It's called Achieving Healthy Relationships: How to Recognize and Respond to Teen Dating Abuse. There's a group of individuals that sit on this action team. They did a survey at the end of a program last year. They had provided about 6 or 7 different topics for future presentations, and believe it or not, teen dating violence was the top vote getter on that survey. So we've partnered with the Middlesex Partnerships for Youth Incorporated and the Middlesex County District Attorney, who will be actually coming to do the presentation. And the flyer indicates that it will take place on Monday, March 31st, from 7 to 8:30 p.m. in the North Reading High School auditorium. So I just wanted to give you that information because it's very important to the Community Impact Team. And second, I just want to make sure that you are all aware that the annual Parks and Recreation Social, actually the 13th annual, will take place on March 21st from 7 to 10 at the Hillview Country Club. And the last 2 years we've attended because we've had significant votes take
Yes,
place
on both
at
nights.
that time regarding our building project.
It'll be nice to be there this year and not have to
And not have to worry about any votes.
A building project vote. It's a fun night.
It is a
really
very
is.
fun
There's
night.
definitely not going to be a vote, right?
No, they,
No, there's no vote.
I never
Tickets,
heard of one yet.
no.
tickets can be purchased at Town Hall at Ryers and on the Parks and Recreation website. They now have a place for you to go. That's it.
Okay, this
Thank
time I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night.